Now, before we can integrate authentication using Facebook, we'll need to register our application with Facebook and obtain our application ID and secret, which will then be used by Passport to begin with the authentication call using the OAuth 2.0 standard. So head over to developers.facebook.com and log in using your Facebook account if you haven't already. I'm already logged in and can thus see my profile picture here. This Facebook for Developers site is where all applications, be it web, mobile, or the ones on Facebook itself, must be registered and configured before they can get access to anything even remotely Facebook. And so this is where we will have to register our application. So first, click on the My Apps link and click on Add a New App. This brings up a host of options. If you're building an iOS or Android app, then you've got options to go in that direction and register accordingly. However, ours is a web application and thus we'll click on the website button. Now this brings up a quick start wizard. However, I prefer skipping over this process by clicking on the Skip and Create App ID button on the top right corner of this panel, because an app ID and secret is what we're after. So go ahead and click on this button up here. In the panel that appears, we'll type out the name of our app, which in our case is ChatCat. I'm going to leave the namespace field empty here. However, you can go here and put a unique identifier for your app. This is optional though. For the category, I'll select communication because we're building a chat application. Click the Create App ID button now and complete the security check process that appears. And this essentially registers your application with Facebook, and Facebook in return offers you an app ID and an app secret as your private credentials. These credentials will be used by your Node.js app for talking to Facebook for authentication and getting user data such as the name of the user and the profile picture. So let's go back in our apps config folder and in the development.json file. Let's create a new key here called FB, which I'm going to set to an object where we'll create two keys, a client ID, which will have its value as the app ID from Facebook, and a client secret, which is essentially the app secret, which again we'll copy down from the Facebook developer dashboard for our app like so. Now there is a reason why I've named the keys client ID and client secret. Make sure you do that as well and make sure it's written in exactly the same format as I have here. The reason for this is that we are building this configuration object so that it maps directly to how Passport needs it to be. You'll see this in a short while, so just follow along for now and everything will make sense. Now remember the OAuth 2.0 process? Once your Node.js app sends the app ID and app secret to Facebook and the user authorizes access, Facebook has to return control to your app. This will be done using a special route that we will create in a short while. So before we build the route handlers for the same, let's create another entity here called callback URL, and we'll set it to localhost on port 3000 /auth/Facebook/callback. I'm using 2 forward slashes in the beginning to make it protocol relative so that it works over both HTTP and HTTPS. However, since it is likely that you'll be using this strictly in development, you can safely use HTTP here as the protocol. So this is that special route which will be called by Facebook when it wants to reach back to your app to take the authentication process forward. Another important property that we'll set here is something called profile fields. This will be an array where we'll put 3 string entities: ID, display name, and photos. Once again, please ensure you type exactly as I've done here. Using this array, Passport will specifically request Facebook to provide us with the unique user ID that Facebook uses for a given user, the user's name as he or she displays in their profile, and access to an array called photos, where the first element points to the user's profile picture. The interesting thing here is that these keys and their naming conventions follow the contact schema format. Since most APIs will deliver user data in their own unique formats, Passport helps us out by defining commonly used user fields using this standard schema, and it internally does the job of mapping these keys to how a particular API responds. This way, we don't need to worry about how multiple providers would send back the data, because in all conditions, Passport will normalize everything for us using this format. Our API stays consistent and easy to understand. You can learn more about this schema on this page on the Passport.js website, and I do recommend that you check this out. Now, we'll also go into our config loader file, and I'll replicate this structure here as well for when we run our app in the production environment. The only difference being that this time these keys would be accessed using custom environment variables such as FB client ID, FB client secret, etc. using the process.env keyword. The callback URL here will be constructed based on what the process.env.host value is, which usually would be an empty string. Only the profile fields is hard-coded here. You can actually hard-code these when we write out our Passport.js code, but I like how this entire configuration block can directly plug into Passport. Alright, we're almost done. Just a couple of things we need to finish up on the Facebook developers site. Click on the settings button to go into the settings page and make sure you have a contact email in place. I'll type out my mail ID here. This is absolutely important and is a requirement. Next, you can create one app and register it on different platforms. So we'll click on Add Platform, and once again, like how we did in the beginning, select Website as the option since we are building a web app. This adds a new section on this page. Type out your local app URL for now, like so. Then click on the advanced section on the top here, and you'll immediately see a warning which you should be able to easily understand by now. Remember the callback URL we had typed out in the configuration section of our app? We need to register that URL here as well. So scroll down to the field called valid OAuth redirect URIs and type out the callback URL here. Remember, both this and the site URI will be changed when we deploy our app on Heroku. But for now, this is how we want our settings to be for the dev environment. So save these changes and we are done as far as the setup on Facebook goes. Another very critical point that I must make at this stage is before you push your app onto Heroku or even on your Git repo, you must, without fail, set your client ID and secret keys to blank strings, that is a pair of opening and closing double quotes, in the development.json file. This is because these are private credentials that must not be published on disk in a public repo or even in your hosting environment. Otherwise, they can be misused. So set up your app and let's go forward.